Committee, and it's pointing at possible, alleged, maybe murder. Yeah, it's certainly not something that you want to read about from any political party. We like to jade ourselves into thinking that murder and espionage are things that aren't a part of American politics, but they are very much so, especially mainstream party politics. And, we're distracting ourselves talking about some off the cuff comment that Trump made about the Second Amendment, and we'll just sort of ignore what's going on with WikiLeaks here. And, the mainstream media right now is sort of failing at its attempt at not making Trump look bad, because lots of people do think that he looks bad. And I'll grant them that. They're doing a pretty good job of making him look bad. But they're doing a very bad job of making people who like him already like him less. And they're doing a really bad job of keeping people from turning over, because it seems like a lot of people are still turning over to the Trump wagon, the Trump train, and jumping off of the Clinton caboose, because it seems like the Clinton caboose keeps having people mysteriously disappear from it, and the Trump train keeps having people board while it's still going full steam ahead, which is kind of weird, actually. But Julian Assange now has come out with some interesting details. Assange is implying, at least according to an article here from Fox Politics, of course, we carry Fox Radio News here on Hot News Talk Radio, and we also, of course, carry Fox Sports Radio, which is why you hear Colin Cowherd at 12 o'clock here on Hot News Talk Radio. Got my time zones all mixed up. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange implied in an interview that a murdered Democratic National Committee staffer was the source of a trove of damaging emails the rogue website posted just days before the party's convention. I love that when they editorialize, like, it's a rogue website. What the heck is a rogue website, right? I mean, I'm on plenty of rogue websites, I'm sure, if you want to use that terminology. That's like, it's like when they call deep web the dark net. Like, it's not called the dark net. People don't call it the dark net. That's a media made up term. It's like assault weapon. Like there was an assault weapons ban in 1994, but it's completely different from the legal ATF definition of an assault weapon. It's just like media makes up terms all the dang time, and I like to call them out whenever they do, because it's just ridiculous sometimes, the things that they make up. Like the whole assault weapon thing, I think, is the one that gets me the most, where they're like, oh, this assault weapon, look at this assault weapon. It's got the shoulder thing that goes up, and it's a scary gun. It's black, and everyone knows black is scary. It's a scary black gun, and that's pretty racist of them, I will say. That's a scary black gun, and it's got 30 rounds of fully automatic clipazines, and it can fire 30 caliber bullets out of the chambers, and look at that scary black gun. I just hate, it's just like, come on, guys. You'll learn a little bit about something before you do an investigative report on it, you'd think, right? Like, these guys, it seems like they go to a gun store and they try to make the owner of the gun shop look as dumb as possible. And they're like, hey, tell me about the deadly child-killing guns you have. And they're like, well, I mean, we've got some guns here. People buy them for self-defense and for hunting. And they're like, that's good enough for us. And they cut it up so it looks like he says, yes, more children should die. I am very happy about this. It's like, come on, guys. Like, most people, and lots of Democrats buy guns too. It's not just a Republican Democrat thing either, because lots of liberals like guns too, believe it or not. So the whole argument's like, oh, look at these conservative gun nuts. I know lots of liberal gun nuts too. Like the hippies in the 60s, a lot of them were all about guns. Think about someone like, oh gosh, I hate it when I forget people's names. I have it and then I just lose it immediately. He was a very famous journalist. He wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Fear and Loathing in the Campaign Trail 72, and he was on the road with the Hells Angels, and I just immediately lost his name. I always forget his name, and for some reason in my head, I can only think Edward R. Murrow, and I know that's not him at all, because Edward R. Murrow is the guy in the movie Good Night and Good Luck, which is a really good movie and really interesting story, but I completely lost his name. But anyway, he was a relatively, I wouldn't say left-leaning guy, but he was pretty liberal in a lot of ways. And he had tons of guns. In fact, he killed himself with a gun of his own volition, of his own choice, because that's when he decided he wanted to go out. He was a nut job, but he liked guns. I don't know. People go nuts about the whole gun thing, and I think it's silly. I think it's a distraction from what's really happening. And that sounds like crazy conspiracy stuff where we're like, oh, you can talk about what's happening in the world all day, but what's really the problem is what's happening next door to you. Your neighbor might be a member of ISIS. It's the whole thing where it's like, oh, it's a distraction. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange implied in an interview that a murdered Democratic National Committee staffer was the source of a trove of damaging emails, which the Rogue website posted just days before the party's convention. And speaking to a Dutch television program, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of, on Tuesday, after announcing a $20,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Seth Rich's killer, Assange says the July 10th murder of Rich in Northwest Washington was an example of the risk leakers undertake. So this is an implication that he was the one who leaked the information to WikiLeaks. Now, WikiLeaks has always taken very seriously the role of the journalist. And by that, I mean they've not leaked out the names of people who have leaked information. Obviously, there are things like Bradley Manning, now known as Chelsea Manning, who leaked information and was found out, but not because WikiLeaks leaked his name to anyone, or her name now to anyone. That's not how it worked. She, I'm not sure. In the past tense, is it he or she? Anyway, the person formerly known as Bradley Manning was caught because he was caught, not because WikiLeaks outed this person. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts, he says, to get us material, and often at very significant risks, Assange says. As a 27-year-old who works for the DNC, was shot in the back, murdered just a few weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. When the interviewer interjected that the murder may have been a robbery, Assange pushed back, saying, no, he said, there's no finding, so I'm suggesting that our sources take risks. So that's a very, very serious statement from Julian Assange that suggests possibly that this DNC staffer was murdered instead of killed in a armed robbery that went wrong. That seems to be, and I'm not going to make any assumptions about what Mr. Assange may have been saying, but that seems to be an implication. Now, I could be wrong about that, and I'm sure Assange is going to make a statement later on about it, maybe, anyway. He might make a statement about that later on, but the public perception right now seems to be that Assange is making some statement saying that this man who was killed, we know he was killed, may have been murdered as a result of what he may or may not have given to WikiLeaks. Now, that's a very serious implication, because while I disagree with basically the entire Democratic National Committee platform, saying that they are guilty of murder is a whole nother thing. And I'm not saying that right now. There's been no court case, there's no trial, there's no nothing. But if it turns out that they are, in fact, murderers, that is a very significant revelation, I guess, for the Democratic Party, and may even split it apart completely. Now, before you think, well, look at this Republican shill, I'm really not, because I don't like the Republican Party very much either. I agree with them more than I agree with the Democratic Party, but that's just because of issues like for instance, I'm not for gay marriage because I have religious leanings, right? However, I think that marriage, right, like marriage is not a state institution. Marriage is a religious institution coming from God, which gays, to use that term, can't fall into, right? Like they can't actually consummate a marriage, and thus can't biblically or common law be married. Now, they can cohabitate and get legal benefits or whatever, and frankly, I don't really care. The thing is, people think, well, you must hate gay people. I really don't. I really have no problem. Well, I do have a problem, but I don't have any like violent feelings towards people who are homosexual, and I don't have any ill will towards people who are homosexual. That's not how I operate. It's just my religious leaning has me believe that gay marriage is not a thing. But marriage is not a state institution either. And so the whole idea of, well, you know, we need to make this kind of marriage legal and that kind of marriage legal is really escaping the entire point of the idea of marriage, which is not a state institution. We keep liking to pretend, well, the state gives you the power to marry. It doesn't. The state is just a proxy which accepts that, okay, the state recognizes these two people as being married, and thus in state records, they are now married. It's a completely different thing from actual marriage versus paper marriage, right? And there's other people who can make this argument way better than I can, so I'll leave it to them. But yeah, I disagree with the Democratic Party a lot more than I disagree with the Republican Party. But the Republicans and the Democrats both seem to like war a lot more than I do, and they seem to profiteer off of it a lot more than I would like. I certainly recognize the need for military contractors. I don't really have a problem with security contractors or military contractors, but morals and ethics should trump money which is a funny way to put it nowadays, but should supersede money always. But, it never does. That's just how it is. So Julian Assange seems to believe that or at least appears to believe, according to these reports, that a man may have been murdered as a result of what he gave to WikiLeaks. So when pressed as to whether Rich was in fact the leaker, Assange stated that the organization does not reveal its sources. So maybe Assange slipped up a little bit there, or maybe he just knows something that we don't, and he's not outing him as a leaker. He's outing him, or not even outing him. He's just saying he knows something about that murder or killing that we don't. Police have said they believe the motive was robbery, and there's no evidence that Rich's murder was connected to his work. But Rich's father has said the 4 a.m. murder, in which Rich was shot several times from behind, did not appear to be a robbery, as his son's wallet and watch were not taken. Now, I will point out, this is not the first mysterious death that's been linked to a political party. You may remember there was a man who was going to testify. I think he worked for the UN, and I don't have my papers in front of me to show it, but a man who I believe worked for the UN was found dead when a barbell apparently fell on his neck and strangled him to death. And this came just a few days before he was going to testify before the FBI regarding Hillary Clinton. So obviously, a little bit messed up what's going on in American politics. And this election is a lot different from a lot of the other elections that we've had, because this election is very, how shall I say, this election is a lot more public and open, but also closed and secretive at the same time. We're finding out things about the different political candidates, not from themselves, but from different leaks, different staffers coming out and making statements, newspapers, tabloids, what have you. And it seems like this election is a lot more inflammatory than any of the at least 21st century elections we've had, of which we've had two, I think. Let's see. 2004. Okay, we've had 3 21st century elections so far, this being the 4th. So it's a weird situation that we're in. The 21st century, don't get me wrong, was a messed up century in a lot of ways. The 20th century had, of course, you had the racial tensions that we had back then. The whole civil rights movement was causing chaos in a lot of states. And I'm not saying the civil rights movement was a bad thing, but it was causing chaos in a lot of different states and a lot of different areas. So you had that heightened tension. You had Watergate. You had Vietnam. You had, of course, World War I and World War II. You had the anarchy scare. You had the Red Scare. All these different things going on. This political season is actually pretty tame compared to a lot of the political seasons we've had before. And people going nuts about, and I'm not defending what he said, but people going nuts about Trump saying that the whole deal with the Second Amendment, people maybe could do something about that. That's not a direct quote, but I think people are overblowing that and making a news story where there really isn't one. I think it was a joke, perhaps in poor taste, not really a threat. And I'm not defending what he said, but it seems like a joke more than a actual threat against Clinton, because that just seems dumb to think that he would actually threaten another political candidate. He was making a joke, and it's a joke that I would have made. So I'm not running for office, fortunately, but it's a joke I would have made too. So I can sort of sympathize with that. It's not that he actually wants someone to shoot Clinton. It's that he's making a joke about that situation, which is, it's hard to explain. It's sort of a comedic thing. It's hard to explain that, because the more you try to explain it, the worse it sounds. So I guess just sort of take it on face value. He said something off the cuff and didn't really mean that any harm should ever come to anyone, because that's a dumb thing to say as a political candidate. And even Donald Trump, who's made a few gaffes, is not that dumb to say that Clinton should actually be shot, because that's not something that he would say. He's not, I don't believe, a physically violent person who wishes physical violence on other people he disagrees with. Except for the time he said that that guy should be punched. That's a little bit different. But you know what I mean. I hope you get what I'm trying to say here. And I'm not a Trump apologist. I guess I am in this instance. I'm not a Trump apologist usually. But what he said there, I think, is being way overblown. Yeah, it should be talked about because it's a public thing, and he's a public figure, and every presidential candidate should be scrutinized to the nth degree. But going on about it like we went on about the Melania Trump thing, it just seems like, what's the journalism in this exactly? It just seems like a waste of time. There are a lot more things we could be talking about, because, again, here's a story where there's allegations a man was murdered over leaks, possibly. That's a big deal, and it's a way bigger deal than Trump making an off-the-cuff comment. Now, if Trump actually said, yes, we should get together a militia and start murdering government officials, that's like kind of another deal. But this is actually possibly a real murder that didn't just theoretically happen. A man actually was murdered. The circumstances for it are up for debate, but a man actually was murdered. And we're going to talk about an off-the-cuff comment that a presidential candidate made. There's zillions of off-the-cuff comments every day. And this is nothing compared to what people like Nixon said. And even he didn't get as much scrutiny, it seems like, as Trump is now. I mean, come on, people. It's like the whole thing with the New York Times saying, well, you forced us to be biased now. Like, no one's forcing you to be biased. You're just projecting your own political biases into your news reports and giving an excuse for it, saying, well, Trump has to be stopped. That's an excuse, yeah, but it's not a very good one. It's just a excuse to use your own political bias because you're too lazy to be an objective journalist. That's all it comes down to. Way to go, journalists. You're lazy. And we kind of knew that the whole time. Political journalism in America and probably around the world has been really tainted by leftism in so many ways that it would blow your mind if you read the things I read about what's happening in American journalism. And I'm not saying that I'm a Walter Cronkite, although he was pretty leftist too. I'm not saying like I'm a Walter Cronkite or an Edward R. Murrow. I'm saying that I know things that are just basic, it seems, journalistic knowledge. Like if you have a personal bias, make sure to try to check that at the door before you write your article. Don't try to insert your opinion into your news articles. And if you do that, maybe you should be a blogger instead of an actual, journalist. So many news articles these days read like blog posts on, Joe Blow's political blog at blogspot.com. It just seems unprofessional to the utmost. And for some reason, we assume, well, they work for this big magazine owned by, Condé Nast or whatever. So we'll just assume that their word is worth our ear or our eyes. And most of the time, it's really not, because they're not saying anything novel. They're just spewing the same leftist crap they read on Tumblr the other day. It's not really interesting. And there's zero reason to listen to a lot of these guys. And I'm not just saying that because I disagree with their political positions. I'm saying they're not saying anything new in opposition. If they were coming up with good, interesting counter debates, I'm cool with that. I'm fine with people not having my political leaning. I prefer when people don't have my political leaning because I like to know what the other side thinks. And I'm not saying that, like, so many people make this mistake where they think that because you disagree with someone's political position, you must think that they're just a complete moron. And that's not true. I don't think that people who disagree with me are dumb or stupid or going to hell or whatever, although some of them might be. It's really different from that, because you can be very IQ intelligent and still be leftist, right? I disagree with you, and I think you might be morally wrong on several counts, but I'm not going to say that you are an awful person who should be exterminated or anything like that. And for some reason, the other side has a hard time taking that stance, where it's just unfathomable to a lot of leftists to think that someone disagrees with me, thus they must be like a racist bigot or something. And, saying I'm not racist is one of those things that sort of a loaded die. You know what I mean? Because you feel like you have to have burden of proof on you. It's like, what someone accuses you of being racist and you just sort of say like, well, I'm not. What kind of support can you give for that other than, well, I'm not? I have several black friends. You can't make a good statement or good counter argument to the whole, well, you're racist thing. That's why it's such a good argument. Well, look at this bigot who thinks this thing that I disagree with. It's a great argument. It's a non-argument, but it's a good way to get people to sort of shut up and just think that your opinion is okay or whatever. Your opinion is fine, but I'm going to disagree with you all day is the thing. And so many people take disagreement as like a personal thing. They're like, this guy disagrees with me on the internet. He must think that I'm going to hell. It's like, not really, man. I mean, I'm just saying that maybe Stalin wasn't such a great guy and you blew up about it and called me racist. And that's kind of weird. Like, people these days have no spine. Like, come on, learn to live a little, right? Like, people in this world are going to disagree with you. I know that's like a shocking thing when you step out of your college class, out of your women's studies class, and people start saying that, like, we shouldn't give minorities a special seat in politics just because they're minorities, and it should actually be more like meritocracy than that. And people go, what? How dare you? It's like, why would you implement someone who has not proven themselves objectively just because they are a certain person? That in and of itself is showing a racial bias. So what sense does that make? And people go nuts at you like you're a racist for saying that. It doesn't make any sense to me. It just seems like sort of a meritocracy sort of thing. or people should prove themselves before they get hired. Big whoop, right? Like, that's how it's been for hundreds of years, and it's not a racial thing, but whatever. People online, right? People online are nuts. We're going to talk about the space race and how SpaceX, they're basically the same thing, is working on a Mars engine, sent it to Texas for testing. Could we be going to Mars soon? And a company is working on a ship that will be deep space mining asteroids. Exciting stuff here on Binary.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. They're soaring worldwide. Prices for gold and silver are soaring worldwide. Rick Davis wants you to take advantage of them. Go to Rick Davis right now. Rick Davis Gold and Silver. Get yours today. Your cash, and more cash. Go ahead, take advantage of them. Gold is soaring past $1,350 an ounce. That's $1,350 an ounce. Silver is out of this world too. Buy and sell at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Gold, silver, jewelry, rings, watches. Rick Davis has got what you want. Right on. Cash, and more cash. Rick Davis has got so much cash it's as tall as a billboard. And he wants to stuff it in your pocket. Cash, and more cash. Yours for the asking. Come on in today and watch metals rise up as high as Rick's billboard. Rick Davis Gold and Diamond, 5301 Brainerd Road. You know where it is. Come get your cash, and more cash.
Rubber's tough, but foam rubber is soft. Foam rubber is the star at Stuff It Upholstery, which uses it to revive your couch, your embarrassing easy chair, your boat seat cushions. Stuff It Foam Rubber in Hickson covers Chattanooga and surrounding areas. Don't throw out that favorite easy chair that's grown haggard and barbaric. New life for your seat cushions. Premium auto-grade rubber foam for your restaurant, church, or business. Stuff It Upholstery brings comfort and relief. Go ahead, skid away from flat, dull, and droopy cushions. Relax, restore, revive. When comfort matters, Stuff It. 4608 Hickson Pike, 877-1616. Ask for Larry. That's 877-1616.
On your signature, you can get $150,000. Can you believe that? $150,000 on your signature. Hi, I'm Bruce Krebs with the Entrepreneur Source. There's a program right now that you can get $150,000 on your signature with no pledge of collateral or personal guarantee. Call me at 423-875-5621 to learn more. 423-875-5621. You've been thinking about starting a business? Don't do it on your own. I have a proven track record for the last 13 years, a 96% success rate. I can guide you into a franchise where you will pay yourself through the startup phase with very low or little risk. Call me now. I'm Bruce Krebs at 423-875-5621. And make sure to listen to the Entrepreneur Hour every other Wednesday from 11 to 12 o'clock. Call me now, 875-5621.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. Multiple shootings overnight on Windsor Street and Sharp Street. According to the police, one man was shot on Windsor Street, a 25-year-old Jamario Gibson, shot through the leg. And on Sharp Street, 2 juveniles were shot at. Both are suffering from non-life-threatening gunshot wounds, taken to the hospital. They're expected to be okay. The CPD is still investigating. There's no suspect information at this time. A homeowner defended his property on Highway 58 when he says he saw a man rummaging through his girlfriend's truck parked outside. He grabbed his handgun and went outside to confront the man. When he saw what he thought was a gun in the man's hand, he shot a warning shot into the ground and ordered the man to the ground. It turned out that he was holding knuckle dusters or brass knuckles instead of a gun. Police arrived and arrested him. He's been charged now with aggravated robbery and theft over $1,000. The search for Skyla L. Wilson is still continuing on, and now police are looking in South Carolina and Florida as well. They believe the child may have been taken from Bradley County to a beach on either South Carolina or Florida's coast. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Becoming partly cloudy out there for the afternoon. Hot highs 90 to 92. A spotty shower may push through, but not many. Tonight, lows back into the lower to middle 70s with any showers diminishing. For Thursday and Friday, not much change. Only isolated afternoon showers and storms. Highs 90 to 92. For lunch or dinner, come to Guthrie's, home of the original golden fried delicious chicken finger with their special sauce. Open daily, locations in Trenton, Signal Mountain, and Ringgold. Go get Guthrie's. It's always good. And I'm Gene 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Core.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
I've got a theory about space. The theory is that, and it's not really a theory about space as a broad thing. It's more a theory about what will happen when we start mining things in space, because I think that that's going to be the big thing, is mining objects in space. And here's the thing. I'm not a fan of government control of much of anything. As you know, we're pretty free market over here at Hot News Talk Radio, and particularly at Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. This is Binary, the show we talk about technology and quite a heck of a bit more. The number to call in, as always, is 423-800-8949. Put that in your contacts on your phone, 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in here at Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Here's my deal with space, though, space travel. What if, and this is just theoretical, but what if we send up, and by we, I don't mean the country, I mean some, company sends up a rocket or whatever that goes up and mines from particular asteroids and realizes, hey, there's a ton of gold here on asteroid Series B. And on that asteroid, they mine up all the gold that they can find and carry and take it back to Earth. Now, wait a minute. You've just taken all the gold from that asteroid and brought it back to Earth. Now, gold, the value of it, is mostly, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems mostly based on how little of it there is. Now, there's a lot of it, but if you suddenly have tons and tons of it, it's not really worth much of anything. I mean, steel is not really worth that much. Aluminum is not really worth that much. But if there wasn't very much of it at all, it would be worth a lot because it's needed for a lot of manufacturing processes, and there's not really anything that can do what it does. Gold's a lot of the time the same way. There's a lot of gold on Earth, but there's not that much of it. It's not like we're running out or anything, but there needs to be quite a bit of gold in the world for manufacturing to work, because there's, I think, an ounce of silver is what I read in most everyone's cell phone. An ounce of silver in each cell phone. That's a lot of silver for the average person. That's, a pretty good amount, an ounce. And if you've got a ton of cell phones and managed to get all the silver out of each cell phone, that's a pretty good amount of silver you've got there. Assuming you didn't pay full price for each cell phone, because then you're getting ripped off. But assuming that you didn't, you could somehow 100% recycle all of it out of those cell phones. You can make a profit doing that. So there's a lot of silver and a lot of gold in manufacturing. It's a great conductor. Platinum is another one. It's a great conductor. There's platinum on spark plugs. I just watched a video of a guy who extracted platinum from spark plugs. He managed to get like several milligrams of it from like 20 different spark plugs. So you get the point. These are very useful, necessary, and somewhat expensive commodities. But what if there was a mission, and a successful one, that brought back a ton of gold from a asteroid or another planet or a moon or what have you, any other celestial body? What would that do to the price of gold? Would it plummet? Probably. So what then would we do? Because there are a lot of people who have invested in gold and silver as well. What if we brought back a few tons of silver too? That wouldn't make a huge difference, a few tons, but what if it was a regular thing where there's tons and tons and tons of, eventually there's thousands of tons of silver that have been brought back that now have depleted the worth of regular old coin silver? That seems like a bad thing, right? So what's the solution to that problem? I don't know if there is one, other than, and this is where the free market thing comes in, other than, unfortunately, legislation. And like I say, I'm a pretty free market guy, and I don't normally believe in legislation. But if something comes in that undermines and entirely erodes the value of gold and silver, should governments do something about that? I don't know. That's the thing. it's one of those theoreticals that now is a possible reality. This could happen in the next few years. What do we do about it? I mean, I don't know. What do we do about that kind of thing? What about diamonds? Now, diamonds I don't care so much about because diamonds are actually not worth that much. There are just a few companies that sort of prop up the price of diamonds that make sure they're really expensive, but they're actually not really that expensive, and you can synthesize diamonds that are basically exactly the same as regular ones. There's no reason to care about the price of diamonds, essentially, other than the fact that there are people who are dying over the price of diamonds in other countries. So that's kind of a big deal. But diamonds are not even the coolest gemstone, and I think fire opal is way cooler and would make a much better engagement ring than diamonds would, but that's just me. So, so just saying. So it leads to this weird theoretical situation, though, where what do you do suddenly when all this is depleted? I don't know. Do you have a response? 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949 is the number to call in. What do we do if a company brings back several hundred tons of silver or gold from space and puts it out into the open market and, say, sells it? Because that's a great way for that company to now make a profit. What do we do about that? Is there anything that should be done about that? This is a very theoretical situation that could become a reality in the next few years. So there's a lot going on in space news, and I'm always very excited about what happens in space. But SpaceX has shipped now its first Mars engine to Texas now for tests, according to Ars Technica. So this says here that SpaceX appears to have taken a significant step towards or forward with the development of a key component of its Mars mission architecture, according to multiple reports during the small satellite conference Tuesday in Logan, Utah. SpaceX President Gwen perhaps Shotwell, cool name, said the company has shipped a Raptor engine to its test site in McGregor, Texas. To ours that the engine is indeed been moved to Texas for developmental tests. Now, the engine, of course, is probably the most important part of the ship, other than life support and radiation shielding. So it's pretty important that they have a way to get up to Mars in order to get up to Mars, and this is their mode of travel, this giant engine. The Raptor is SpaceX's next generation of rocket engine. It may be as much as 3 times more powerful than the Merlin engines that power its Falcon 9 rocket and will be used in the Falcon Heavy rocket that may fly in late 2016, this year, or early 2017. The Raptor will power SpaceX's next generation of rocket after the Falcon Heavy, the so-called Mars Colonial Transporter. Although official details regarding the Raptor engine remain scarce, SpaceX founder Elon Musk has suggested that the engine will have a thrust of about 500,000 pounds, roughly the same power as a space shuttle's main engines. So that's pretty impressive. If they can supersede the, say, Saturn V rocket power, that's impressive. They've now built the most powerful rocket ever used. That's very important that a private company could do that. Whereas the shuttle was powered by 3 main engines and 2 boosters, which caused major problems at one point. It's believed the large rocket SpaceX uses to colonize Mars would likely be powered by a cluster of 9, count them, 9 Raptor engines. So SpaceX making very important leaps and bounds towards possible, maybe, could be someday, missions to Mars. And that is a major goal, by the way, of SpaceX, is getting to Mars and having colonies on Mars. That's a big goal that SpaceX has. So being able to achieve that would be sort of the fruition of everything SpaceX has been working up towards. SpaceX is, as far as I know, not profitable yet. It's sort of leaking money and hoping that investors will keep giving it money, which they most likely will, because it seems like something that's going to make money at some point. Everyone recognizes that SpaceX is probably going to be making money at some point. So it's just fascinating that we're so close to this at this juncture in human history. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago that we first started going into space in the first place. The late 50s and early 60s, it's not that long ago. That's within most of our parents' or even our lifetimes. And now within the lifetimes of maybe your kids or your grandkids or you, you can actually witness a mission going to Mars and possibly even colonizing space. We think about it as a long time of separation between, say, Apollo 11 and now, but really in the grand scheme of things, it's not. In fact, it's about the same distance between the first flight, like actual flight, and the first space launch. That's really significant. Think about flight. The first flight was, I oh gosh, I'm gonna totally blow it. I'm only gonna say 1909, but I could be wrong about that. But the first powered flight was at the very beginning of the century. And then the first mission to the moon, successful mission to the moon, Apollo 11, 1969, just about 60 years later, or maybe even 50 years later. That's a huge, huge leap in technology from point A to point B. Now imagine point A being moved back to Apollo 11 and point B being whenever we make it to Mars. That's, again, not a very short or not a very long period of time to have a huge leap in technological prowess. And we do have a huge leap in technological prowess. Think about technology 40 years ago versus what it is now. 40 years ago was a long time ago from our perspective, but technologically speaking, we've jumped a huge, just made a quantum leap. Centuries, it seems like it would have taken to advance to where we were 40 years ago and to where we are now. It's incredible how far we've come. Think about how life was in, say, 1976. Things were good, right? Not economically, but technologically, things seemed to be pretty cool. We were not at the peak, but we were getting there. The integrated circuit was a thing now. Transistor radios were a thing. FM radio was starting to become big. But 1976 was not the peak of technology or anything like that. 1976 is not a high-tech era. And then you start to enter the 80s, and the personal computer now is everywhere. Then you get in the 90s, and everyone has one, it seems like. Then the internet comes along. And that's all just within the span of 40 years. That's a really short period of time to think about. The technology has changed completely, drastically from 1976 to now. I always like to make these comparisons because it puts things into perspective. When you think about when maybe you were born or your parents were born to now, things are so different. And we sort of take that for granted because we are used to the gradual progression of technology. Whereas when I was young, the internet was still not really an infant thing, but it wasn't as big as it is now. There wasn't any social networking. There wasn't Web 2.0 or anything like that. AOL and Prodigy were still how everyone was getting online. The internet was not a novelty like people thought it would be, but it was not nearly as advanced as it is now. 64-bit architecture was still kind of a novel thing. Linux was terrible in 1995. Unix was great. Windows 95 had just come out. That's when I was born. And Mac OS 8, I believe, was king at the time. It's just crazy to think how far we've come from 1995, even 21 years ago, to now where we are today. We have progressed leaps and bounds. We just don't really think about it because we're used to that technological progression. It's amazing stuff. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, and hotnewstalkradio.com. Number to call in is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949. There's a mining firm that plans to launch a deep space asteroid by the end of this decade. And they better hurry up because it's already 2016. So they've only got, 4 or 5 years to finish this up here. So asteroid mining is now the ultimate high-risk, high-reward business. It used to be going out west and making your fortune. And then it was oil mining in Alaska. And now it's possibly going to be going up into space and bringing stuff back. That could be the new frontier. And it looks like it will be. If you ever see the movie, and I highly recommend this film, by the way, go watch the movie Outland with Sean Connery. That's what I'm hoping it's going to be like, minus the murder and bad people. But I hope that we have a future kind of like that, which is really cool. They had these odd video phones that were really, early 80s tech. I loved it. Asteroid mining is the ultimate high-risk, high-reward business, though. And while there are undoubtedly billions and some argue trillions of dollars worth of valuable minerals and metals in near-Earth asteroids, a host of questions remain about the practicality of harvesting them. How much technology is required to identify asteroids and extract the materials? How difficult will it be to return them to Earth or other desired destinations? And how much will the upfront costs be? Well, the upfront costs I would estimate would be possibly billions of dollars, unless you want to go it unmanned. I think unmanned is probably the best way to do space travel, honestly. While humans would be missing out on the whole going into space thing, it's a lot lower risk. If you can build, say, drones or autonomous vehicles of some sort that can handle the mining for you, maybe even remote controlled, then you don't have to worry so much about, valuable people dying in your mission. And then once you've got the whole robot thing down, then you can worry about sending people out. Plus, with robots, you don't have to worry about radiation nearly as much as you do with people, because we are pretty dang sensitive to radiation. By the way, a good way to treat yourself for radiation, it worked in Ukraine, is to drink lots and lots of vodka, because apparently alcohol soaks up radiation, and you get it out of your system at some point eventually after you've drunk a lot of it. A few companies such as Planetary Resources, I should say, have begun to try to answer these questions, and it seems the initial responses aren't entirely positive. The venture has decided to put its initial focus on Earth observation rather than deep space asteroid mining, but another asteroid company, Deep Space Industries, appears to be pressing ahead. On Tuesday, that company announced its intent to fly the world's first commercial interplanetary mining mission called Prospector 1. Cool name. Under the company's new timeline, Deep Space Industries plans to launch the Prospector X mission in 2017 into low Earth orbit as a technology test bed, I should say, for further development of low-cost exploration spacecraft. Then, before the end of the decade, they say, the company would launch Prospector 1 to rendezvous with a near-Earth asteroid and investigate its value as a source of mineral resources. So this could be two things in terms of its success. This could be a huge marketing program, right? A huge marketing opportunity here. Prospector 1 brought to you by Red Bull, right? I mean, come on. Huge marketing opportunity there. Also, if they bring stuff back, that's a very big deal, especially rare earth materials, which we use in our smartphones that we're kind of worrying about them running out. That's why the Chinese, by the way, are setting up mining operations in Africa. The Chinese economy depends on small electronics in a lot of ways. Small electronics are in basically most of China's exports, and China really needs those small electronics to be bought up by people. And if you run out of the materials to make those small electronics, your economy's in big trouble. That's why I believe China has set up mining operations in Africa. And that's why they're building roads and infrastructure and stuff. They're investing in Africa because it seems Africa is the next big thing for rare earth materials. But other countries, like the one that houses this prospector company, appear to think that space is much better than human exploitation. So they're going into space instead of exploiting regular, normal, hardworking people. So it's very, very interesting, the difference in approaches. The Chinese are saying, well, why don't we just go to Africa and exploit people? And other people are saying, why don't we go to space and exploit asteroids? Because I'd much rather exploit asteroids than African people who really don't need to be exploited anymore. That's the last thing they need is yet more exploitation over there in Congo or Ivory Coast or wherever they're building their roads and their mines and all such things. It's really a fascinating idea, though, that there's this massive economic reason for why these companies are wanting to go into space. Rare earth materials are running out, and we need them in our phones, we need them in our computers, we need them in basically every electronic ever, and they're usually found in either China or Africa, and Siberia sometimes too. So China's building these massive, massive mines in Africa in order to build out their resources, in order to gather resources to build these small electronics, which their industry and economy depends upon. Space exploration, though, is very in our heads, right? Very sci-fi. Because when you think about space travel, you probably think about one of two things, or maybe both at the same time. You think of the Apollo missions, right? Very exciting, amazing things. And you also think of sci-fi. I think of Alien. I think of the off-world colonies in Blade Runner, which is ironic because they're never actually on screen. I think of, again, the movie Outland with Sean Connery, great movie. Check it out. Little known, great movie. I think about movies like those, Solaris, Event Horizon, which is probably not a good movie to think about with space travel, quite frankly. But I think about movies like those, very sci-fi movies, and I realize we're getting closer and closer, Star Trek and Star Wars, obviously, getting closer and closer to realizing that whole vision of space travel being the norm, and space travel being a economic and job opportunity for a lot of people. Because let's face it, nowadays, there's not a whole lot to do in terms of exploration, in terms of a new frontier, because most of us, or a lot of us, can afford to fly pretty much wherever we want. You know, we could save up. The average person, even if you work at McDonald's, can probably save up and fly to China or fly to South Korea or Russia or England or wherever you want to go. You can fly pretty much wherever you want and not spend a whole lot of money. A good friend of mine right now is staying in Ireland, and she's not spending a whole lot of money to do it. That's exploration and that's adventure, yes, but it's not the same, man. It's not the It's hard to explain. It's not the same as that exploration, that Wild West frontier, North Pole, South Pole, across the ocean exploration. It's hard to explain that drive, that want for humanity to go forward and explore something new. It seems like we're burned out on what we have now, and maybe for good reason, because we're sort of exploiting and gathering up everything that we can now here on Earth, and maybe we need to go off-world to get what we want. I'm not very environmentalist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm all for drilling oil and all that kind of thing. I really don't care about drilling oil. But I do think also that if there are alternative and cheaper and better ways of gathering resources that also mean we get to explore cool things, I'm all for that. There's so many people who are, all about space travel strictly for, well, we got to get off this oil dependency. I don't think the oil dependency is a huge deal. I think traveling into space is better just as an exploratory and other reasons too, where you can just discover new things that we've never seen before. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. Hopefully we don't accidentally step on an ancient alien burial ground and get ourselves in a war with reptilian aliens that we could never win. Colin Cowherd coming up next here on Hot News Talk Radio.